You know, for as beloved as League's lore is, there are certain characters that really remind you how this game's story has always been in a state of flux. Before even the great reboot of Runeterra's entire world, many characters went through several different retcons since their inception. If anything, it's a testament to how Riot once had a habit of just throwing character concepts into the game first and hashing out their backstories later. Alistair as the Minotaur, Blitzcrank as the Automaton, Warwick as the Werewolf, you get the idea. One of the standout examples of this, to me, is League's own resident half-dragon, Shyvana. Released on January 11th, 2011, Shyvana was initially introduced as the Dragonborn, though they later changed that title. Possibly because Skyrim became a thing later that year, but who can say for sure. That said, the idea of a dragon-human hybrid is one that dates back much, much farther, and there is no shortage of characters across many different franchises that fall into that mold. The idea is quite simple. They look like an ordinary person at first, but then transform into a ferocious dragon when provoked. Sometimes they are born with this ability, while other times it was acquired or even forced onto them. Alternatively, there are situations where the dragon is merely disguising itself as human for one reason or another, only revealing its true form in moments of anger or necessity. As for which camp Shyvana falls into, well, that depends on the version of her bio that you're looking at. Since her inception, Shyvana has had a total of 5 backstories, counting the one currently available on her universe page. In her earliest bios, she's the offspring of a human woman and a shape-shifting dragon. Later iterations would change it so that Shyvana's mother was the dragon and her father was human, though the process by which she was born would become increasingly convoluted. We'll get back to that later. While Shyvana's backstory has been altered many times over the years, there are a few key elements she retains in each iteration. Firstly, her half-breed nature leads her to face prejudice and discrimination from both humans and dragons alike. Second, Jarvan IV is among the first to look past her nature and show her kindness, leading Shyvana to join the Demacian military as a show of gratitude. Lastly, Shyvana struggles to live among humans and keep her draconic urges in check. Overall, Shyvana has a pretty solid foundation for her character, which makes it even more unfortunate that the rest of her story has been in flux for so many years. A large part of that, I think, is that dragons themselves were just sort of a nebulous part of Runeterra's world for a long time. They were initially just kind of there because every fantasy setting needs to have dragons of some kind, but their actual role in the story never initially amounted to much beyond one being a monster on Summoner's Rift that you could kill for buffs. Shyvana's original bio hinted at the idea of celestial dragons being a thing, many years before Aurelian Soul was even in the concept phase, might I add. Shyvana's second bio removed her celestial nature, though, and instead established that some, if not all, dragons could shapeshift. Her father was murdered by another dragon for using this ability to elope with humans. And as Shyvana wept over his corpse, she was found by the young and brash Prince Jarvan IV. Together, they found and slew the dragon responsible for killing Shyvana's father, and Shyvana herself was offered a place among Jarvan's royal guard. Shyvana's third bio was more or less the same, but with some added details regarding her father and the dragon that slew him. It should be noted that neither Shyvana's second or third bios really offer much insight into her mother, who was originally just a simple farm girl in the first bio. It's here that we notice how Shyvana's story seems to always focus almost exclusively on her draconic parent. The human parent is only given a passing mention at best, or never mentioned at all. I think this realization is what led Riot to take the direction they did for the next 2 iterations of Shyvana's backstories. Arguably for the worst. Shyvana's fourth bio is a lot to cover. we're talking 17 paragraphs, which puts it up there as a contender for one of the longest champion backstories ever written. So, here's the Cliff Notes version. Shyvana is no longer the result of a human-dragon union, but rather a mage touching a dragon egg which caused the baby inside to be born as a weird hybrid of the two species. Because that's just a thing that can happen, I guess. Anyways, Shyvana's mother, a dragon named Eva, didn't care for this, but her unnamed father, who is also a dragon in this version, tried to defend her. As the two fled Yeva's wrath, Yeva tracked down and killed her mate. And Shyvana fled to Demacia because she believed the Petricite forest there could hide her from her mother's wrath. Eventually, she found Jarvan IV, wounded from battle, and decided to save his life. When he was better, J4 decided to repay this debt by helping Shyvana kill her mother and offering her a place in the royal guard. The two returned to the capital city triumphant, where Shyvana would attempt to start a new life despite the nation's fear of magic and, by extension, her. Shyvana's fifth and currently final bio plays out more or less the same, albeit somewhat shortened, but with one major detail changed. This time around, a human mage would straight up steal an egg from Eva's clutch, escaping with it to Piltover. Once again, a human mage simply touching a dragon egg is apparently enough to create a hybrid, and so the egg that this man initially planned to sell hatched into a baby with purple scaly skin. The mage decided to raise this child as his own, moving to a set of remote mountains, but it wasn't long until Eva hunted them down again and killed the man, who is also never named, I might add. From there, Shyvana's new bio plays out more or less the same as her previous iteration, albeit trimmed down a bit. Yeah, if it weren't obvious, I don't much care for this iteration of the lore. Since they removed the idea of dragons being able to shapeshift into humans, Riot had to find a new explanation as to why and how a half-dragon was even possible. And the explanation just comes off as really hand-wavy. A human mage touched the egg. Really, guys? That's the best you could come up with? I mean, the Vastaya are right there. You know, the literal animal-human hybrid species you made specifically to justify why half-human characters like Shyvana exist? Would it really have been so hard to just say that Shyvana is from a rare group of dragon Vastaya? Or what, can Vastaya not take on draconic traits for whatever reason? Okay, fine, maybe they want to make Shyvana a little more unique. She is called the half-dragon after all. Never mind that her bio literally alludes to other half-dragons having existed at one point in the past. Also, Alistair is called the Minotaur, despite the fact that Minotaurs are also a race in Runeterra, and also not Vastaya for whatever reason. But alright, let's say that we want Shyvana to feel truly special. Like there are no other creatures like her in all of Runeterra. There are still a myriad of ways you could have gone about that. Maybe she's just the last of her kind, or maybe she was initially a human that was transformed into a half-dragon rather than vice versa. I mean, you can apparently turn into a harpy through some kind of cursed blood ritual, so why not do something similar with dragons? Ranting aside, though, Shyvana's story is not just complicated by her bio, but by semi-recent events as well. Yes, it's time to talk yet again about the Rise of the Sentinels event. At this point, I think we all know what a disaster that event was. Though I will say that I think Shyvana getting ruined was, in concept at least, one of the few smart decisions made during that whole fiasco. I think her ruination was a great basis for what Viego's powers can do to people, preying on others' fears and doubts to bring out the worst parts of their personalities to the forefront. Shyvana has spent years serving in Demacia by this point, but despite that, many still hate and fear her for being a magical creature. She's had to actively suppress and reject half of her entire being just to be accepted by the Demacian public. But of course, that leads Shyvana to harboring her own internal fear and resentment of them deep down. Seeing that come to a head in the visual novel was actually pretty great. Shyvana forsaking her loyalty to the king and her few friends to finally let her dragon side loose was a spectacle. It's actually a clever touch that ruined Shyvana even prefers to remain in her draconic form rather than her human one, only reverting to the latter when she's been knocked out. And yes, her ruined human design is even worse because it somehow turns her skin normal, but whatever, we won't talk about that here. That said, the question now remains, what has happened to Shyvana after the event? After all, even if she was under Viego's influence, ruined Shyvana torched a Demacian city and killed an unknown quantity of people. Given their attitude toward her already, I doubt the Demacian public would just readily accept her back. She's always had the blessing of J4 to fall back on, but even if he wants to continue supporting Shyvana, can the new king of Demacia really afford to keep sheltering a magical creature at this point? The citizens and nobles alike would doubtless pressure him into exiling, if not executing the beast, assuming Shyvana could even attempt returning to Demacia after the Sentinels event. Unfortunately, like many characters involved with said event, we don't really know where Shyvana is, what she's doing now, or how she feels about the whole thing. Riot seems fully intent on focusing on characters and stories not tied to Sentinels for the foreseeable future, because goodness knows ignoring the problems that need fixing and focusing on new projects is where this company shines. And on that note, let's talk about Shyvana's future VGU. Okay, so I'll be completely honest with you all, I actually don't dislike Shyvana's current design. Oh, don't get me wrong, her model and animations are clunky as hell, and her original splash art wasn't anything special, but her new artwork just looks badass. Not only did the whole image get a considerable glow up, but Shyvana was given actual scales on her skin and notable musculature. Yeah, this design isn't fully done justice in-game, but I honestly feel it does a great job at what it's trying to portray. That being said, I am aware of the common fan criticisms and do acknowledge that there are some valid complaints. First off, Shyvana's armor. While I think it's a fine enough design on its own, it does admittedly suffer from not looking particularly Demacian. Shyvana is from an era in which Riot never really tried all that hard to give champions from the same region a super unified aesthetic. So Shyvana's red and gold outfit does make her stand out a fair bit from the other soldiers in the Demacian military. Legends of Runeterra has attempted to address this by introducing the Dragon Guard, a special branch of the Demacian military that specializes in defending against dragon attacks, which are apparently common enough in Demacia to warrant their own response force, I guess. The Dragon Guard wear red as opposed to the typical Demacian silver, so that's meant to explain the difference in Shyvana's outfit. It's not a perfect justification, but I think it works well enough, all things considered. However, I do acknowledge that a design you have to justify retroactively is far from a perfect design. You could certainly make the argument that, with her affiliation to Demacia being such an integral part of her character, trying a little harder to match Shyvana with the region's actual aesthetic would work better from a visual storytelling standpoint. Unfortunately, with her standing in Demacia potentially compromised after the Ruined King incident, I think it's safe to assume that Shyvana may have to abandon that affiliation whenever her rework comes out. Speaking of which, let's get back to talking about her rework. Shyvana has been slated to be on Riot's list of future VGUs for a while now, but was beaten out by Skarner in the last poll. Many fans seem to want Shyvana's updated appearance to be more muscular and bulky, akin to something like Alawi. While I can certainly see that tying into her actual gameplay as a pseudo-tank character, I'm afraid that's probably never going to happen. The fact that they've already used Shyvana's current design as a basis for both her appearances in LOR and the Sentinel's visual novel signifies to me that Riot has no intention of flat out changing Shyvana's body type. At best, her update will probably be an in-universe change, like Udyr or Vayne. Perhaps Riot could say that Shyvana gets exiled from Demacia, only to have her start searching for the half-dragons spoken of in ancient myth. You know, the ones established in that one throwaway line in her bio. Maybe she could stumble across, like, a forgotten half-dragon temple or a hidden tribe of others like her, where she acquires some new special armor designed specifically for her. At the very least, that would better justify why her armor seems to change shape with her when she enters her dragon form. Overall, despite the mishandling of both Shyvana's lore and her design over the years, it's not unsalvageable. Shyvana quite possibly has some of the biggest potential for development of any champion in League, both from a visual and storytelling perspective. It's just a shame that we probably won't be seeing that potential properly addressed anytime soon. But what do you all think? Are you a fan of Shyvana's current story and or design, or would she have benefited from another massive overhaul? Leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I'll see you all next time.